Hey everyone, Mr. Davitt here. I want to walk you through the first steps of the DBQ, and I've already given you these articles. I've already given you this reading specifically, but what I want to do here is I want to go through kind of how I would set the stage up and what I'm seeing as I go through this DBQ. You don't have to necessarily do it like this. This is just one kind of thought on how you may want to do it. But I have a few things here, and one is my, obviously, DBQ First Steps planning sheet that I'm seeing here, and then the other thing that, and that's in a Word file, and then the other thing that I have here is our Industrial Capitalism DBQ. So I have all these ready to go on exam day. You're going to have all these kind of ready to go. At the very least, you'll have your DBQ in one tab, and then you'll have your writing pages in another, so that'll be kind of the way you set this up. So if I actually go to the top of this, first page is what we're going to expect to see on the AP exam, which is kind of our basic reminder of time and all the kind of stuff like that. Again, this is what you've seen before with previous DBQs from previous years, which is that you see the actual rubric kind of outlined for you. And this works and this is fine, but at the same time, I might suggest one of the ones I've made or one of the ones I posted from some of our other AP sources that might be a little more helpful for you in kind of spelling things out a little more clearly so you can make sure you hit the points. As I go through this, I'm doing this with the understanding that you've already read the documents, so I'm not going to be reading them to you. I'm just going to be going over what I'm kind of seeing, how I'm breaking it down, and what I'm kind of noticing as I go through this. So anyways, go down here, and right away the first thing that I need to look at is the question. It's a short question. They're all short questions, but it's loaded. It says, evaluate the extent to which the rise of industrial capitalism fostered social change in the United States in the period 1870 to 1910. So if I go to my DBQ organizer, I can see here our first thing that I really want to do is our historical thinking skills. Most DBQs are going to fall under one of these categories: compare, effects, causation, and change. Well, this question specifically says change, so that's our big skill. Okay, things changing from industrial capitalism. My next thing I want to look at is question specifics. So what type of change? Is it just asking for any change or anything like that? And it's not. It's asking specifically about social change. So that's important because if we think about industrial capitalism, we know that this fostered a lot of change, fostered political change, obviously huge economic change, but it doesn't really want us to look at that. It really only wants us to look at social change. So that's really important and something that's something that we need to remind ourselves, because if we focus on the other types of changes, we're not answering the question. We're also possibly wasting time. So this is no good. Our time frame, it says 1870 to 1910. So that's important for context. It's also important for making sure we include things for our outside evidence that's within this time period. So that's going to help us here. So right away, we've just broken down the question. We have a better feeling for it. And again, it might seem tedious, but at the end of the day, if you spend the extra 30 seconds breaking down the question, we're going to make sure we don't answer the wrong question and we answer the right question. So next thing we're going to do here is the next thing you got to do, which is read and annotate the documents, and kind of 3 columns here. The first 2 you definitely need to fill out, and then PHIA you should do for at least 3 of the documents, I would say. That way you can include 3 instead of just the typical 2 in case you mess one up. So first thing here is we're going to just kind of source the document. So our first document, we don't know the author specifically, but we do know it's from a magazine called the Labor Standard, which is a working magazine. Anytime you see something labor involved in there, that's going to tell us that. And it's from June of 1877. So let's kind of jot that down here. So Labor Standard, and then 1877. We probably don't need the exact date. Main idea I'm getting from this article is that kind of 2 major things. Number one, that the rich treat their workers badly for their own wealth, and along the lines of they're acquiring wealth because of the hard work and the exploitation of their workers. And then the other thing I'm noticing here is that he mentions that the poor also desire riches, and because of that, they are not unified as workers kind of against the rich. So that's obviously a problem. Right away, I'm noticing a purpose here, and even though I don't know the author, because this is a labor magazine, kind of going to that last part there, which is the fact that the author wants workers to unify more strongly as a unified workforce. So that's something I'm going to write there because that's definitely a good purpose I can use here, and that seems to be the overarching idea here. Wants the workers to understand they're being exploited. So that's good. And again, remember, this is just for me. So as I'm going through this, I'm doing this as an example. I'm trying to be a little professional here, so I'm like erasing mistakes. You don't need to do that when you do this on the test, okay? You can just go through. You can misspell all the rest of those things. You can actually misspell in your essay. It doesn't necessarily matter as long as you have everything else there. So that's a good way to start ourselves through. Okay, we go to document 2, which is our next document. This is from Demarest Lloyd, and this is from 1884. It's the Lords of Industry. Very interesting. So Demarest Lloyd, Lords of Industry, 1884. And remember, that's because a few things. We want to make sure that when we're doing this, we do not try to use the documents to say document 1 says. No, at the end we'll kind of use that parentheses doc 1, but we want to introduce it by the title or by the author. The author's a really good way to do this. And when I read what Demarest Lloyd is saying in this document 2, what I'm seeing here is he's saying basically the people at the top are making the price of goods high and preventing consumption because they're trying to prevent prices from being too cheap. So this is obviously a problem. And right away, actually, if you recall, and you might not remember this, but we talked about Demarest Lloyd like probably for 10 seconds in class, but you might remember him. He's a muckraker. So because of that, we could definitely do a POV here, which is the fact that, wants to expose the ills of our big businesses and corporations and kind of their malicious practices. And that we know because he's a muckraker, and that's what muckrakers like to do. If you remember Demarest Lloyd, he actually was big against Standard Oil more than anything else. So that was his big kind of gripe. And again, he doesn't necessarily mention that here, but at the same time, he does obviously speak about the ills kind of here of this. So that's a good thing to look at there. So right away, just with the 2 documents, we already have 2 PHIA. They are not necessarily reaches. They are what we're seeing in the document. So that's all good stuff. Moving right along to document 3, we see if we go to document 3, okay, this is a name you'll definitely remember, which is Carnegie, and this is hopefully a source you might remember, which is the Gospel of Wealth. So we're going to write here, Carnegie, Gospel of Wealth, and this is from 1889. And Carnegie basically saying here in this very famous excerpt from this speech, which is along the lines basically of, you know what we got to do as rich people is use surplus wealth for the betterment of mankind. And just kind of a reminder here that, this is a very famous speech by Carnegie. It was not necessarily overarchingly accepted by a lot of the other robber barons, but it was definitely something that, was at least embraced by Carnegie, as he did allocate much more of his personal wealth than anyone else. Well, I think I should include that in context right here. I think that'd be appropriate, because right away what I can say here, if I'm doing historical context, I can say huge wealth inequality, rise of captains of industry / robber barons, including Carnegie himself, richest men in American history. as these people amassed huge wealth that even to this day is unrivaled. So I think that'd be appropriate here for historical context. So I think that's really good. If I move over to document 4, we see here that in document 4 we're looking at this very famous political cartoon. This is another cartoon you might remember. I think I'll just do the date here, and I'll put the author. You probably don't know the author, but this is Kepler. It says that up there. This is from 1904, and this is a political cartoon. And I want us to get better at our political cartoons. And what I mean by that is if we look at this political cartoon, okay, yeah, we can see Standard Oil's big. You know, it's this octopus. Okay, but what are we really seeing? What is this octopus grabbing? And what you should hopefully notice here, this is the Capitol. This is the White House, which it's right over. And then this is our other industries and things like that. And then we see here the state houses and stuff like that. So hopefully what we want to notice here is Standard Oil is dominating the government, basically, and becoming a huge monopoly over, you know, federal and state governments. And if we do PHIA here, probably good to do another kind of context here, I would say, into talking about basically the idea that Standard Oil used malicious business practices in order to become a, you know, pretty vicious monopoly. And failures of antitrust allowed it to do so. Definitely by 1904, that was absolutely the case. With Sherman Antitrust Act, no good. Oh wow, I just mentioned something that maybe I want to use down here, outside evidence, Sherman Antitrust. So again, that's one of the reasons why I put this down here. It might not come right at the end. It might come kind of in the middle of this whole thing. I'm like, oh geez, I want to talk about this. Okay, we're already on to the last document, and again, you'll need to move through the documents a little bit quicker, but hopefully you realize that when you're doing the DBQ, you will not need to be narrating yourself and kind of explaining your justifications as I am doing here. This is just for kind of helpful consideration. And so if I go here to document 5, oh, this is another source I definitely know, Sinclair with the jungle. Now, with that being the case, we want to realize this, which is that it's not just all of the jungle for Sinclair. And what we want to see, main idea kind of that I'm at least getting from this, has a lot to do with the difference in class/workers. And what we're seeing here is the fact that, and what he's kind of talking about here is common working people and how kind of worked really hard, looked down upon, versus kind of skilled workers and things like that. So that's definitely something I'm seeing here that I notice also as well. And you could say here, by the way, if we want to do POV, that, you know, Sinclair, he's a muckraker also. And that one, by the way, you should know. We did talk about him quite a little bit. And so because of his muckraking journalism, we would expect that he's going to be, you know, and what he's trying to do here, expose the ills of the factories. In particular, if you remember, it was Sinclair that looked at meat packing places, and that's something that he was trying to shed light on and to get government action to protect them, or to protect the consumers. Okay, so just like that, we have all 5 of our documents done. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this, and then I'm gonna continue this in a new video. And in the new video, I'm gonna complete this out. I'm gonna explain my document groupings, why I've picked as such, and then we'll go from there.